it reserves the full right to respond to this escalation. Kuwait International Airport has been damaged in an Iranian drone attack. Authorities said a number of employees had been injured as a result. Kuwaiti officials say the situation is now under control. We have correspondents in Tehran, Washington, D.C., Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, Doha, as well as Berlin. We'll get to them in just a moment. But first, this report from Perry Wilton.
Among the first victims of the attack by Israel and the US on Iran were here at a girls' primary school in southern Iran. People had to dig through the debris to search for survivors next to what appears to be a school backpack lying in the rubble. In Tehran, the strikes hit some of Iran's most important sites, including the Ministry of Defense, the Atomic Energy Organization, and the Pashin military complex. Strikes also hit near the offices of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Israel has said it is targeting dozens of military sites in Iran in coordination with the United States. President Donald Trump said the US will destroy Iran's nuclear and missiles programs.
The United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated.
Trump has repeatedly accused Iran of attempting to rebuild its nuclear
Amer-Israeli bombing
saying
campaign
must
in Iran.
never be
But
allowed to develop a nuclear weapon. Iran has stood
I need
by
you to
its
understand.
nuclear program, saying it
My
was always
feelings
for
might be
civilian
hurt
purposes.
in this process because I'm
Trump
trying to
also
defend
called
that,
on Iran's
and you're
Islamic
making it hard
Revolutionary
for me.
Guard to lay down their arms. Inside
You're
Iran,
making it hard for
hospitals
me.
have been placed on high alert
What about my
with
feelings?
ambulances dispatched from across the capital.
Just a heads up, I
The
couldn't find your
attacks
stream
come
on mobile and had to
despite
search for you on
representatives
PC.
from
What did I
Washington
get?
and
Fucking
Tehran
blacklisted
holding
already?
indirect negotiations in Geneva
I
this
doubt
week.
it.
And as Iran's retaliatory strikes aim for US targets in neighboring countries, the region is facing fears it could be dragged into a wider, longer conflict. Perry Wilton, Al Jazeera.
Mohammed Val is in Tehran for us. Mohammed, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that there has been an attack on a sports hall in southern Iran that's killed at least 15 people. Do you have any more details at this point?
The American base being struck is them going udrup, 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 udrup.
We don't have details in terms of any new death toll, for instance. We still hear only about 15 people, but we understand this may develop into more casualties, as we have seen with the strike earlier today on a school in another area of Iran. The toll began with about 20 people, and then it rose to more than 80 people. So we understand that maybe some people are still under the rubble, and that situation is developing. We are expecting more from the authorities about this attack that has killed 15 people so far in the town of Lemda. In the Fars province, to the south of the country. But we have also a wave of attack that took place just less than an hour ago, about 40 minutes ago. Here in Tehran, we heard at least 7 loud explosions in western and eastern parts of the Iranian capital. Other cities have also been targeted according to the reports we have, including Zanjan in the west, Urmia in the west also, Bushehr in the south, and the whole city of Qum, south of Tehran, as well as Garmadare in Al-Burz province, west of Tehran. So, I mean, this is a new wave of attacks that has targeted several cities, including also, in addition also to Tehran. And that's an indication of the fact that this campaign is going on as the Americans and the Israelis have promised. And the Iranians are not giving much by way of details about the targets specifically, or the casualties, or the amount of destruction that has been taking place. The Iranians are much more focused now on the possibility of someone seizing the opportunity of these strikes to do something that can hurt national security. So police is disseminating messages, warning people and asking them to report about any suspicious activity in the streets. So because the authorities are trying to watch that attempt by the Americans and the Israelis to create a situation of chaos that can be seized, according to the authorities here, that can be seized by elements, rogue elements, or people who are here implanted as spies for the enemy to create chaos and confusion in the country.
Okay, we're going to go to Rosalind Jordan, who's in Washington, D.C. for us. And I know Donald Trump hasn't spoken or been seen himself so far there today, but I understand that the White House has put out a statement explaining exactly what he has been up to in the last few hours.
Well, according to the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt, the president did have a phone conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There's also reporting indicating that the defense secretary was at Mar-a-Lago with the president as the airstrikes were being launched overnight East Coast time. We've also understand from a U.S. official that in addition to a classified briefing which the Secretary of State Marco Rubio had with the so-called Gang of Eight, top political and intelligence leadership on Capitol Hill, that he did reach out to 7 of the 8 members of Congress overnight to inform them that the airstrikes and the air war had begun, and that he was able to speak to 7 of these 8 members of Congress. We don't know which was the person that Rubio was not able to speak with. We also understand that once the air campaign was underway, that the Pentagon did contact the leadership of both the Senate and the House Armed Services Committees to inform them of this action. But this is not the kind of notification that would satisfy the 1973 War Powers Resolution. Numerous congressional Democrats are saying that Congress needs to reconvene immediately in order to vote on whether to retroactively approve the Trump administration's decision to launch this war against Iran.
Okay, thanks so much, Ros Jordan, for us there in Washington, D.C. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the attack on Iran followed negotiations that were, quote, fruitless. He echoed Donald Trump's call for Iranians to take their fate into their own hands.
In recent months, the tyrants in Iran have been plotting to rebuild their nuclear and missile capabilities and to bury them underground, where we won't be able to strike them. If we don't stop them now, they will become invulnerable. To that end, their representatives in negotiations are trying to buy time, attempting to buy time in fruitless and deceitful negotiations with our American friends. Whoever lays down their weapon, including among the regime forces, will ensure their safety and secure their future. The Iranian people in all their diversity, Persians, Kurds, Azeris, and all other citizens of this wonderful nation, this is your opportunity to establish a new and free Iran. Take your destiny into your own hands.
The Israeli military says it has preemptively imposed restrictions on people moving in and around the West Bank to counter potential terror threats. Noor O'Day is joining us from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Noor, we heard a little bit from Netanyahu there, basically framing this along the same lines as Donald Trump, as a war for the people of Iran. How is that message going to land coming from Israel, though?
Well, this is Netanyahu's line, Tom, and it has been his narrative for decades, preaching a need for overthrowing the government of Tehran for at least the past 20 or more years, saying to Donald Trump that negotiations with Tehran was pointless, that they would only be deception, and really rallying the Israeli public over this point of consensus. Israeli Jewish society is very polarized. But on Iran, there seems to be almost a consensus, at least a politically correct one, where nobody would question the choice of attacking Iran, of preempting the Iranian regime from having more military capability. The doctrine in Israel of needing to be the hegemon in the region is one that does not have any pushback in Israeli politics or society. And that's why, even though the Israeli public has been prepared for a war that will exact a price, it's not clear what that price will be yet, but it will disrupt their lives. A state of emergency is in place in Israel. There are no public functions. There is no school. People have to stay next to the shelter or inside of one, and that's how they spend all of today. And yet, there is support among Israelis for this because they believe this is the only way for Israel to stay on top of it, on top of the region, that is, and to continue pushing back at its perceived enemies.
Okay, thanks so much for the moment, Noor. Well, Iran's foreign minister has been speaking to US media. Abbas Araghchi has acknowledged that Iran may have lost a few commanders, but that it wasn't, quote, such a big problem. He also said that Iran was open to dialogue.
If Americans want to talk to us, they know how they can contact me. We are certainly interested for de-escalation. This is not our war. This is an imposed war against us. This is a war of choice by the United States, and they have to pay for that.
Araghchi also stressed that Iran would not give up its right to enrich uranium.
We agreed to do enrichment only based on our needs, the needs of Iranian people. I can tell you one of our needs. It is your Tehran research reactor. This is a small reactor, by the way, built by Americans before the revolution. And this reactor produces radioisotopes, medicines needed for nearly 2 million Iranians. So how we can give it up, how we can just stop this reactor? So we would continue our program based on our own needs.
We're going to go back to Mohammed Val, who is in Tehran for us. And we heard from both Netanyahu and Donald Trump trying to frame this as a war for the people of Iran. How have the people of Iran responded to that message?
Well, what we have seen so far is a demonstration that took place at the Palestine Square here in Tehran earlier this afternoon. We can't estimate the numbers, but it is probably more than 1,000 people gathered there. That's in a condition, a very specific condition, when people are fearing, more strikes and unable to go out of their homes, and when there are instructions that people shouldn't go to places where they can have some risk there. So we have seen that gathering of people there at the Palestine Square today, demonstrating against these strikes. That's the only sign now of reaction by people collectively. We have seen also a small demonstration in the streets here tonight in the same direction, people shouting against these strikes and condemning the Americans. The Americans are betting, and the Israelis as well are betting on a kind of, chaos that can happen, and that chaos can be seized by people who are opposed to this regime, because we have seen lots of demonstrations over the last few weeks and months against lack of freedoms and all kinds of complaints by those people against the regime. And the Americans and the Israelis think that just by conducting these very powerful strikes and probably killing some of the top leaders, that there is enough popular force and popular anger against the regime that people will go to the streets and take matters into their own hands. We have heard President Trump say that, but there are no signs so far of any of that thing happening in the country. Instead, the government is issuing statements, demands, and alerts, asking people to report about any suspicious activities in the streets, asking people to keep an eye on those types of activities, so that nothing of the sort that the Americans and the Israelis are planning can happen.
Going to shop.
Okay, thanks, Mo. We're going to go to Rosalind Jordan once again, who is in Washington, D.C. And as we have been talking about, that this wasn't approved by Congress, many saying that Trump's attack on Iran doesn't have any mandate or legal basis to it. How big a problem is that actually going to be for President Trump, though?
Well, a slim majority, but nonetheless a majority of Americans in a recent poll indicated they were not interested in a war in Iran. This is something on which Donald Trump ran when he ran for re-election in 2024, that he wanted to end wars. He was not interested in launching new wars, and he certainly did not want to see the U.S. military entrenched in another conflict in the Middle East. Now we have the second strike on Iran in about 8 months, and this time you have 2 aircraft carriers and some, tens of thousands of U.S. troops in the greater Middle East who are poised to carry out this air war for some indeterminate amount of time. This is also a matter where it's pretty much falling along party lines in Congress. Democrats, almost to a person, are opposed to this military action. Republicans, with the exception of one who has been very critical of the Trump administration, applaud the decision to start launching airstrikes on Iranian targets overnight. Now, Congress is out for the weekend. The Senate is supposed to come back into session this coming Monday afternoon. The House of Representatives is not due back until Tuesday, but there are many Democrats in both the House and the Senate saying that people need to come back to Capitol Hill immediately in order to vote on a war powers resolution, whether to approve or to condemn the Trump administration's decision to go to war against Iraq. Because the Republicans hold a slim majority, it is unlikely that Democrats would be able to get a move of condemnation forcing the Trump administration to dial back. But they're saying that this debate needs to be held publicly because it has not, in their view, been held publicly up until now. There simply has been this drumbeat to war in the Democrats' view, although the Republicans are arguing that this is an action that is long overdue, decades long overdue in their view.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosalind Jordan, for us there in Oman.
Great job.
Okay, we've got many guests joining us now to help us dissect all of this. Abdullah Babood is a chair of the State of Qatar Islamic Area Studies at Waseda University in Japan. He joins us from Muscat. Shrita Parsi is the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Here with me in the studio is Paul Musgrave. He's Associate Professor of Government at Georgetown University here in Qatar. And Mohammed Al-Mazri is a Professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. Thank you all very much for joining us. If I could begin with you, Abdullah, because obviously Oman played a significant role in trying to negotiate some sort of deal in the last few days. That obviously didn't happen. Can you just give us an idea of the feeling there among Omani leadership to what we've seen over the last 10 hours?
Well, I believe that Oman has been always trying to ensure that any conflict in the region is solved through dialogue and through negotiations. And particularly when it comes to the United States and Iran, but also other conflicts in the region. I think Oman has expended a lot of efforts in this matter. It's not just this particular negotiations, but if you look at last year also, before the 12 days war in June, then Oman had been trying to resolve this conflict. And as you know, if we go back even with the nuclear deal, Oman has always been active in this regard. So I believe, the amount of efforts that they have put, and also the amount of enthusiastically, supporting a peaceful resolution of this conflict, is going to, what is happening now is going to actually make the Omanis feel a bit disappointed, at least to say that. I think they will be dismayed with what has happened. The fact that the foreign minister of Oman, Said Badr, was on US TV last night, saying that that Iran had almost agreed to everything that is possible that they wanted vis-a-vis, of course, the reduction of the uranium and the enrichment, and also willing to negotiate its regional policies and also its missile technology, etc. So Iran was actually accepting almost all the terms and wanted to have them agree through a negotiated settlement. And then, to be surprised like this with a war that is not expected, I think the Omanis will be, I believe they will be very upset and very dismayed. But I think they have no option but to continue the dialogue and to ensure that this comes to a peaceful resolution.
Yeah, Oman obviously not the only ones in the region to be dismayed at what has happened. Trita, if I can come to you next, what, if anything, changed, do you think, in the last 24 hours or so that made military action in the eyes of Donald Trump inevitable? What was the tipping point, despite all this anger that he must have known was coming from those in the Gulf region?
I think, unfortunately, Trump had already accepted the Israeli narrative and the Israeli red lines. The narrative that says that Iran is very weak and has no choice but to capitulate, and the red lines that are designed to be rejected by the Iranians. And as a result, once again, Trump allowed himself to be trapped by the Israelis into a situation in which war was the most likely outcome. He still could have pulled out. He could have celebrated the fact that the deal that the Omani foreign minister in detail laid out on CBS News last night was far stronger than what the Obama administration had achieved with zero enrichment en masse, but also de facto zero enrichment, at least for the next 3 to 4 years. And taken that as a huge victory and said that this was achieved because of his military threats, etc. But he nevertheless chose to go down the path because what he's looking for was humiliation. He was looking for capitulation rather than a deal.
Mohammed, do you subscribe to that view, that he was looking for annihilation, basically?
Yeah, and I think, and I said this in the interview as well, I think this was basically pre-planned. I thought Marwan Bashara said it best a couple of hours ago. He said that the problem was that there was a breakthrough. And as soon as there was a breakthrough, the United States and Israel, I think, decided this was, this was the time. But I think they've long wanted to attack. I think that the negotiations were just kind of a smokescreen. And so, yeah, this was a premeditated attack. And I think it's worth underscoring that this is an Israeli war. I thought the Almani statement from earlier today by the foreign minister was interesting. He said, this is not America's war. And what he meant, I think, is that this is Israel's war. And so we have another instance of the America First president, Donald Trump, doing things that are actually serving the Israeli agenda, not the American agenda. And let's watch and see what the fallout is on the American right wing. You already have people condemning this. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene taking to X a couple of hours ago and condemning not only this attack, but specifically the attack on the school that killed dozens of little Iranian girls. And then you have people on the right wing also retweeting or reposting Charlie Kirk from just 6 or 7 months ago, saying that a regime change operation in Iran would be insane. So let's watch and see what the fallout is on the American right.
Yeah, I see you nodding along there. Obviously, that is something that Donald Trump is going to have to take into account. How do you think we haven't heard from him since it's turned daytime there in the US. What do you expect from him in the coming hours, and how is he going to try and sell this to his base effectively?
Well, predicting what Donald Trump is going to do, fool's bet, not going to do it. Because as we've seen over the past week, he can say one thing and then reverse course the next day. What I do think is that President Trump is going to have a real problem with his base because he did campaign explicitly on going through with no new wars. And here we are in the war that American restrainers, that people on the right, that ordinary Americans who don't care about foreign policy have tried to avoid avoid, which is not just a war in the Middle East, but a war with the most powerful of America's adversaries in the Middle East, and doing so with tactics that seem remarkably ill-matched to the goal that President Trump laid out, that goal of putative regime change or an option for regime change. I do think that the Americans may be more interested in negotiations than some of our guests have said. They have certainly said that they'd like to consider off-ramps for continuing dialogue. Certainly, I know they'll be lobbying for that on the Hill, by the base, and of course by regional governments who don't want to see any more of these explosions overhead that we've all been living with. But on the other hand, the Trump administration has laid out from the commencement of these discussions goals that it would be difficult, if not impossible, for any Iranian government to agree to, goals that touch on the very heart of sovereignty. And if you can't agree to something, you can't negotiate over it. And that's going to leave everybody in a really tough situation, even if sincerely, who knows if they do, they want that off-ramp.
Yeah, making it incredibly difficult to find that. We'll come back to all of you in just a moment. We're going to go to Zain Basravi, who's in Doha. Qatar's foreign ministry actually released a statement earlier about the ongoing attacks. It says the state of Qatar expresses its strongest condemnation of the targeting of Qatari territories with Iranian ballistic missiles, considering it a flagrant violation of its national sovereignty, a direct assault on its security and the safety of its lands, and an unacceptable escalation that threatens the security and stability of the region. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs affirms that the state of Qatar reserves its full right to respond to this targeting in accordance with the provisions of international law and in proportion to the nature of the aggression in defence of its sovereignty and to safeguard its security and national interests. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasises that the state of Qatar has been and remains among the first to call for dialogue with the Islamic Republic of Iran and has advocated for continuing on this principle as the optimal foundation for addressing differences and resolving disputes through peaceful means, thereby sparing the region the risks of escalation. We're going to go to Zain Basravi, who is here in Doha, and talk has been of escalation right throughout the day, hasn't it, Zain? We've heard booms throughout the afternoon and into the evening. They seem to come in waves, although at this point in time, it seems relatively quiet. Is that what you're seeing from your vantage point out there on the Corniche?
That is correct. For the last 2 or 3 hours, and I say this with some trepidation, we don't know what's going to happen throughout the course of the night, but for the last 2 or 3 hours, we have not seen those interceptions. We have not heard those explosions that have been going off since this morning for hours. For the last 2 or 3 hours, the skies over Doha seem calm. What we may see in coming hours is as Israel continues to pummel targets in Iran, Iranian guns may shift their focus to focus more concentration, more power, more firepower on targets inside Israel. But it has been a very dramatic and tense day for the cities in the GCC. Of all of the countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council, only Oman is the only country that has not seen some kind of attack throughout the course of the day. Now, Qatar saw multiple attacks last year when Iran hit it after U.S. carried out strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran attacked Al Udeid Air Base in June 2025. We saw Israel carry out attacks on targets here in West Bay, in the area just behind me, on a Hamas negotiating team. That happened in Qatar as well. Saudi Arabia has, for a while, seen attacks, sporadic attacks by Houthi vis-a-vis the war in Yemen. The UAE saw similar attacks as well. But none of these were of the scale that we are seeing now. What's happening today is different. For the longest time, cities in the GCC were an oasis of calm, of commerce, of progress, of financial investment, of tourism. What we're seeing now, especially the videos that are beginning to emerge on social media, some still need to be verified, of aftermath in Kuwait, Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi. All of this really indicates that these interconnected conflicts involving Israel, Iran, and the United States, and conflicts all over the region from which these cities had been sheltered for so long, those conflicts are now directly knocking on their doors, and they are inside their homes. That's what we've seen play out throughout these attacks and this retaliation from Iran over the course of this morning and this afternoon.
OK, thank you so much, Zain Basravi there for us in Doha. You're watching our continuing coverage of the joint Israeli and US attacks on Iran. I'm Tom McCrane. Just want to bring you up to date with the very latest. Tehran is retaliating by launching a wave of strikes targeting Israel and US assets right across the Gulf region. The Israeli military says it has struck dozens of military targets across Iran, warning that attacks will continue as required. Iranian authorities say a strike on a girls' primary school in the south has killed at least 86 people. Iran has closed its airspace and cut mobile phone services. It's also vowed that its response to the attack will be, quote, crushing. And a satellite image captured by Airbus Defence and Space and obtained by the New York Times has revealed what appears to be significant destruction at the office of Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in Tehran. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has been speaking to US media. He says that as far as he knows, the country's Supreme Leader and President are still alive. Sirens have been sounding right across Israel after the latest wave of airstrikes launched from Iran. The Israeli military says air defense systems are working to intercept the missiles. Some have made impact in parts of the country. And Iran has also launched strikes on US assets across the region, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Iranian drones have struck several residential buildings in Bahrain's capital, Manama. It is not yet known if there are casualties. This follows earlier strikes on US military sites, also in the capital. I'm going to go to Rosalind Jordan, who's in Washington, D.C. And Ros, we keep seeing more and more images of Iranian drones and missiles actually hitting many of their Gulf neighbours. Can you just give us an idea of, obviously there's been condemnation from many Gulf leaders of the US and Israel strikes in Iran. Has there been any sort of messages getting through to Donald Trump in response to what we've seen happen?
The White House has not commented on whether there's been any sort of diplomatic outreach from the Iranians since the airstrikes began. We have only heard from members of Congress. We've heard perhaps most famously from the Omani foreign minister condemning the attacks. We've also heard from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, condemning the attacks. But whether or not there are actual diplomatic efforts underway to try to bring this military confrontation to a swift end, we are not aware of any such contact. If anything, the Trump administration has been saying that it is doing what it considered to be a long overdue attempt to effect regime change, to help the people of Iran, to prevent Iran from being what it calls an existential security threat, not just to the U.S., but to its allies as well. But again, in terms of diplomatic outreach between Iran and Washington, even though they had been negotiating in the past week about the future of Iran's nuclear ambitions, so far no update on any new contacts.
Okay, thank you so much. That's Ros Jordan for us there in Washington, D.C. Well, we're going to bring in all our guests once again to continue this discussion. Abdullah, if I can go back to you in Oman. I mean, we've seen Iran continue to strike not only Israel, but many of the Gulf countries, which it had warned that it would do. I mean, this is all part, no doubt, of its plan to try and draw everyone into a wider conflict. Do you think it's going to work?
I think, of course, we need to condemn what the United States has done and Israel in attacking a neighboring country when it is in negotiation. I think equally, we still don't understand why the Islamic Republic would also attack its neighbors. I can understand their motives, but that is not something that is acceptable, and it should be condemned at the same time. And I don't think this is going to help the Iranians in a way that it will, while the Gulf states were getting much closer to Iran and trying to avert the war, it's now going to get them to rethink their position as well. And I don't see the benefit that Iran is going to get out of this. And in fact, it's going to not only make the governments and the states and the authorities, but also the people against the attacks on their soil and their sovereignty. So I don't think this is helpful. I think it's a big mistake, and I hope that Iran would stop doing that and continue to defend itself against Israel, against other American interests, but not to attack the sovereign state of the Gulf states, because I think that is going to change perception.
Okay. Trita, if I can come to you. So, as we heard there from Abdullah, there's no real benefit to Iran in his eyes. Do you agree with that? And if so, why do you think that Iran has decided to continue striking these Gulf states?
I think, first of all, the GCC position condemning this obviously is completely understandable. This is their territory. They don't want to be involved in this war. Most of them have made sure that their airspace is not used in the attack. On the other hand, from the Iranian side, their argument is that these bases nevertheless facilitate these attacks directly or indirectly. They have little choice but to do this in their view. What they're trying to do is to expand the theater of war to make it as costly as possible for everyone else for this war to go on in order to amass the type of pressure on the United States to back off. But I think it's absolutely correct to point out that this nevertheless will have likely a very profound impact on the GCC and Iran's relations going forward in many different ways. On the one hand, the perception of Iran as a threat will be solidified in many different quarters. On the other hand, the perception of having bases on your territory enabling you to protect yourself may also come under question. Because now you have a scenario in which these bases are targeted and that these countries' territory are being targeted, not despite these bases, but precisely because of these bases.
Okay, Abdullah, obviously we've heard many countries come out and condemn what Iran has done. Do you think they're going to take further steps, though?
Are you talking about the Gulf states?
Yes, the Gulf states.
Well, I think they have obviously condemned what is going on because they saw it as an attack on their territories and their sovereignty. And despite the fact that they have always, and they've been clear that they will not allow the U.S. and missiles and also the bases to be used against Iran. I believe that the Gulf states are going to recalibrate their relationship with Iran. As you know, there have been there's been a rapprochement between Iran, and particularly Saudi Arabia, and the other Gulf states, and they were working hard to bring them to work together. And the GCC states have been trying to stop this war and in any way possible. I think this is going to have further ramification on the Iran GCC relations on one hand, but also on how the Gulf states view their relationship with the United States, and also the value of these bases as well, because they've been subjected to attacks, not now but before. Now they become a reason for attacking them. So I think there is going to be a very good rethink of how this region is going to evolve and how this war is going to, this conflict going to end. But I believe that the Gulf states will all try their best to ensure that, that this escalation stops at a certain point where negotiations on both parties are back together to negotiate, because I don't believe there is any real solution to this conflict through just waging wars and destructions and killing people. And I think at the end of the day, reason will prevail, and both parties will come to a negotiation. This time, I think Iran will have an upper hand in one way or the other, because they are the ones who have been subjected to these attacks when they were actually negotiating the peace process.
From what we understand at Al Jazeera, that the US military is going to continue carrying out strikes over the next few days, though, Trita, even if they do eventually get to the negotiating table, I guess the initial strikes are the easy part in terms of launching a military operation. What do you think is going to happen next after that?
Well, very much depends on what the results of these strikes are and if the Iranians continue to strike back and what they achieve with their strikes. I mean, if this ends up becoming a costly, delayed thing that just drags on, there's actually no implosion of the regime, there's no softening of the Iranian position, the cost and the pressure on the U.S. rises, the pressure on the president from his own base, from GCC allies, from the rest of the international community starts to go up stronger, then that's when you might be able to see some sort of an exit that both sides want from this. On the other hand, what the U.S. side is hoping is to make sure that probably particularly the strikes that will come later this evening, that will probably be much stronger than what we've seen so far, that will have a decisive blow on the theocracy in Iran and see what comes out of that. But so much of this, on both sides, I have to say, is based on very, very far-reaching assumptions and wishful thinking, to be frank. This could very easily drag onto something that is much longer than either side have anticipated, and whatever exit routes they thought would emerge may never emerge, and instead this will be more escalatory than de-escalatory.
Okay, thank you so much. That is Trita Parsi and Abdullah Bahrud for us there. Well, I want to bring you up to date with the very latest. We understand that 201 people have been killed and 747 injured in the US-Israeli attacks. That is Iranian media citing the Red Crescent. If I can bring you back in, Mohammed and Paul, thank you very much for sticking with us. Obviously, the death toll might not be a surprise considering the scale of the strikes. This is only set to continue to rise, do you think, Mohammed?
Yeah, unfortunately. I think, we all hope that we will wake up tomorrow and hope, that we're taking one of the exit ramps that Trita was speaking to. But I think there's a real possibility that things will get worse before they get better. And it's worth reminding everyone that this is, again, as I said earlier, not just a U.S. war, but it's a U.S.-Israel war. And one of Israel's fundamental aims when it goes to war is to try to inflict maximum damage to civilians in the hope, from their perspective, that civilians will sort of move off of their government, that they'll begin to resent their government. This is what they call the Dahiya doctrine. They've used it in Lebanon. They've used it, of course, in Gaza. And I think we've seen some evidence that perhaps they're using it already now in Iran. So, there's the chance, unfortunately, that there will be many more casualties in this war.
Paul, how is all of this going to be perceived in the US, do you think? Obviously, we saw and heard a lot about that strike on the primary school. That I believe the death toll there is over 86 now. How is the US public going to take this on? Because this is obviously incredibly significant. That it's not just going after the Iranian leadership. There are civilians, many civilians that are being killed right now.
Well, I think that this war is probably going to go down as the war that was least popular with the American people when it was undertaken. If you compare this to the 2003 Iraq War,